You are listening to the Daily Homily for Magdala in the Holy Land.
Standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple there whom he loved, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that hour the disciple took her into his home. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
A thought just occurred to me about 3 minutes ago. If you had a task to just sketch globally the amount of torture happening in our world, how long would it take you to finish the account, just headlines, for all of the cases of torture you know at this time in the world that are happening? On the top of the list, we might easily put all the wars. We would include human trafficking. We would include many of the actions of the cartels. But we wouldn't be finished there at all. We could go through so many different moments of life from the womb to the tomb. And all the consequences of all these deeds, let's say even in cartel leaders, maybe they can stuff their mind or warmongers with justifications and block out any echo of conscience, but there's torture inside their souls at some point. Even Herod the Great, who was one of these line of leaders with extraordinary capacity of violence, a genius in many aspects and other qualities he had for sure, but the story of his ending is very sad. And that's true of many, many people who do great evil. So even though they'll seem to sit on the lap of luxury and sit in great command, at the end they end up also suffering immense torture, like the man on the cross beside Jesus who said, "Remember me today when you come into your kingdom." Imagine turning that torture, even for Herod, even for the greatest, cruelest dictators, despots of history, into a platform for triumph, of true eternal triumph. And this is the mystery of the cross. I doubt that I would say there are very few Christians who do not admit and confess that Christ crucified and risen from the dead is the core of our faith. And that's linked then to the incarnation, and it's when the Word became flesh, and it's linked to Pentecost and the life of the church. And it's the core of all the sacraments we celebrate. So this is the core mystery, and this is why crosses are everywhere. This is why the crucified, we kiss that image because it reminds us, it's not image worship if there's anybody bothered by that listening, but it reminds us of this great line we also had yesterday in the feast of the exaltation of the cross, or sometimes called the triumph of the cross. It's linked to John 3:16. So much did God love the world that he gave his only son. And the readings today are in the normal Sunday liturgy are also very instructive. There's a canticle from Isaiah of the suffering servant. And then there's the encounter of Jesus with the disciples at Caesarea Philippi. And it's actually the watershed of Mark's gospel, or a major dramatic point when he is presenting who is Jesus. And now he asks them, who do the people say I am? And they give all these opinions from the opinion polls of the moment. And then he asks them, who do you say I am? Today I heard a wonderful commentary of Father Jaime Lorenzo. It's on Spotify. It's called God Time, and he does a beautiful daily commentary. And today was very special because he asked this question: who do you say I am? And Christ is asking you, and somebody, your grandchild, asks you, who do you say I am? How much would you be able to say about who Jesus is for you? Just do 2 minutes talking about Jesus, and maybe you are finished. Or maybe you cannot fill 2 minutes, maybe it's 15 seconds. But then your grandma says to you, tell me about Grandpa. And maybe he died 5 years ago or something, and you start telling him about Grandpa. And you could never finish for an hour. But you are exhausted with Jesus in 20 seconds, in 30 seconds. So this is very interesting. Who is Jesus for us is a pivotal question. And Peter says, you are the Messiah. And most of the commentaries I've ever heard always talk about this being a true representation. But I heard one commentary this week from a German priest, Father Clemens Pilar, and he says that actually Peter was wrong, because the type of Messiah Peter had in mind was the earthly, kingdom-making Messiah who would restore the people on their land and restore them to their power and free them from slavery, a little bit like Moses coming out of Egypt. And Peter had to change his idea of what a Messiah was. And he will still take out his sword in Gethsemane. He will still not have the strength to confess Jesus in his moment of trial. So there's a whole walk the disciples have to go. And Jesus is telling them 3 times, the Son of Man must be crucified. And Peter says, no, no, no. And he has to do it again and again and again. And the gospel today, in Mark's gospel, it says he began to teach them. So the second half of Mark's gospel is, okay, now you guys know I'm the Messiah. And up to now, Jesus said, keep it quiet. But from this point on, Jesus speaks openly. They're convinced he's the Messiah. But they need to change their idea of messianic expectation. And they need to walk with Jesus, listening to him saying, I'm going to Jerusalem to be crucified. But it's not only that. It's, you're coming with me if you want to be my disciple. And you're going to walk with me on this path to Jerusalem. And you're going to take up your cross every day. Not my cross. You're going to take up your cross every day. Because in your cross that today is a torture for you, relationships with people you work, relationships with a spouse, problems with children, with grandchildren, problems with parents and grandparents, political problems, church problems, health problems. Just got news that the person has a tumor. Just got news that they are now on end-of-life support. I cannot take it. It cannot be right. God, change this. Work a miracle. To realize that our tortures, our crucifixions, can become the platform of our glory, the entry into glory. And we had this man here a few months ago. I think it's Nicky or Vicky or something like this. His family name is Vikovic or something. From is Slovenian, I think, or Croatian. And he was born without legs and arms. Imagine the poor parents the day he was born. Imagine the parents that would have a sound image of this child before he was born and what the doctors would suggest to them. And he only has a small little mini kind of a foot without a leg underneath him. And he has over 4 million followers on YouTube. And he's a huge influencer. And he is accepted in China to preach the gospel. He is stunning. Imagine the torture the parents went through, but how they came through it. We always admire people who run triathlons and what do you call this other huge sport thing? I had it in my brain and I just lost it. It's a major sports title, and we have one of these guys here. And when he was 8 years old, the doctors told him, you will never play sports again, because his body was totally burned through an accident. His sister threw a can of, or a friend threw a can of gasoline into the bonfire where the camp was going on. And he caught fire. And his hand was welded to his side for 3 years. And he has done 47. He has done more what's he called these things? Ironman. He has done more Ironman competitions than his age. He has like 47 Ironman competitions, and I don't think he's 47. You can find him on Instagram. But imagine the crucifixions he has been through. And we admire him, and we admire this guy, Nick, for what they've accomplished. And especially the parents that brought them through, this 8-year-old and this baby newborn without arms and legs, and they brought them to this level. What the transformation of the parents. We admire these parents beyond the other parents because they've come through these difficulties. Our tortures, our crucifixions are the place where we enter glory. It's not possible to follow Christ without sharing in his cross. And this is the great lesson of Mary. If the cross is the path, then people suffering are the key players. Suffering people are the key players in Jesus' community. These are the power players. Those who live by faith in providence, those who live by humility doing God's will, those who live by love and live patiently as God's partners for his day to show. The heart-piercing sword that Simeon announced to Mary was not a mere word that made her shudder, it was her life. Suffering becomes the place of love's triumph and glory. Don't waste this prime material. Like you can get oil out of the ground and you can turn it into all kinds of incredible fuel levels with high octanes. It's prime material. It's like a metal out of the ground and you turn it into a great art treasure. Do not waste this prime material of suffering as torture, but learn to live with Christ through it. Suffering is destined, like Mary, to become your place of triumph. Standing by the cross of Jesus, he's standing by your cross. Never despair, never give up. This is the place of our eternal joy, our eternal glory.
Thank you for joining us today. If you want to learn more about Magdala, follow us on YouTube and on Facebook.